Hello, welcome back. Yeah, sorry I have to make this a two-part video because the video cut out. There's always this problem with the screen power. I don't know if anyone's knowledgeable about computers. They could explain why it keeps having this thing that it crashes at a certain point. But yeah, going back to this, I guess this position, maybe I'm wondering now, instead of bishop f4, maybe this is more sensible. Because if you go here, I can always just go... Gee, I really don't know, actually. Well, maybe now I castle, right? Exactly, because if you take the pawn, you're going to have a lot of problems on the dark squares. It's clear that white would have very dangerous initiative. Maybe just a move like bishop d2 or bishop f4. White would have huge compensation, I think. So the move order is important. But going back to this position, I didn't go e5, which is the best move. And I probably wanted to, but I didn't really trust my intuition. I vaguely remember wanting to play e5 and thinking, well, g6 looks like a red rag to a bull. Maybe I was afraid of preparation. I was afraid that he prepared something. So I decided just to avoid the fight. And now I went g4, and it's a sign that I really don't understand the position, because g4 is not a good move here. It just doesn't really create enough attacking chances, and you're just weakening your position. Yeah, f5. I think actually maybe g4 wasn't so bad, but f5 was like really ropey. It's like, what are you doing here? Like, this is just awful, right? Because you're just giving up the e5 square for black. And yeah, position just like, I remember thinking this is like embarrassing, you know, I'm not on the demo board, and well, I don't remember anything. I mean, to be honest, it was quite a funny tournament, because I remember I went to a nightclub and at one point I tore my shirt off. I was trying to dance with a girl. Ended up going up the Glastonbury tour, which is like quite a high hill. It's quite a famous hill there. Obviously, they have the Glastonbury Festival there every year, which is a famous music festival. I remember Simon Williams telling me around about that point that he actually went to the Glastonbury Music Festival. He actually jumped over the fence to get in. Probably shouldn't be saying that, because commit the crime, but him and maybe a friend of his, they went, you know, they shared a tent. But yeah, there's a Glastonbury. It was like a Glastonbury tour there, very spiritual kind of place, like associated with the King Arthur legend and all this kind of stuff. Went up Glastonbury tour. I had a panic attack. Had to come down. But yeah, it was a great occasion. I remember one time as well, because we were staying in this school, and I left the reception area, and I started walking, and I fell into a hole. There was like a workman's hole, and I fell into the hole. So it's quite an entertaining few days, actually. Good memories, you know, British Championships. Always like remember, you know, it's like a massive part of my life. But yeah, looking at this, you think, you know, what are you even doing? You're supposed to be one of the better players in the tournament. You know, you're playing on the top boards in the British Championships. I'm giving him this, you know, monster square on e5 for the knight. You're playing like a 120 play. You fiddle around with your knights. What are your knights doing? Yeah. Really, that knight on b3 does not stand well, but the knight on c4 is putting a little bit of pressure on d6. It's really about the only good thing about my position. So yeah, he went rook e8. Actually, the better move apparently was to, I think it was to take, and then do this. Because now, after he went rook e8, yeah, often when you got a slight edge or like a big edge like Murray had here, you know, little mistakes can actually lead to it being close to equals. So, you know, it's like a fine line. So when he went rook e8, I took. Suddenly, White's position is still not great, but it's got a little bit more hope. And gradually, I sort of got back into the game. King b1, I think around about this point, I felt reasonably happy. I went rook f5. Just like a move, right? It's just stopping, you know, stopping him from creating much. If he goes queen c6, it's not so clear, because I've got moves like knight a5, knight queen e4, knight b7. Probably got to take back on b7, otherwise your material down. Then maybe take on d6, you're threatening queen g6. So not so clear for black. Obviously, if you take on d6 straight away, then e4 will hang, like queen c2 is also possible. So Queen d6 immediately is not an option, but if black fiddles around, then it might become an option. And actually, he went king d8 and offered a draw, and that's an interesting moment that I accepted. And I think that's another way that I was weak in a psychological sense, is that when I realised I was worse, I probably realised I was worse in this game, and I'm playing against someone higher rated. I was 24.99 at the time. Murray Chandler was 25.26. You know, I was probably like psychologically relieved that, oh, it's going to be a draw now, when I'd kind of written my chances off earlier. Whereas I think maybe a psychologically stronger player, like say like a David Howell, or, well, obviously Magnus Carlsen would be an example, might just go, look, hell to Murray, I'm going to carry on, play the game, and we'll see what happens. And I'm not saying I'm like a stronger player than Murray, or I'm a favourite from this position. I'm probably underdog, right? He's probably is a generous draw offer, because probably black's position is easier to play than white's. But I could have played on. I could have played on, because at the moment the computer says that the position is equal. I mean, what does it say that I could do here? For example, it says I could take. Actually, deep fritz slightly favours black, actually. So maybe it was a generous draw offer. Like, I could go knight d2. Rook takes f5, g takes f5. And a5 could happen. Yeah, I mean, black's position very pleasant, 2 bishops, but it's still very messy. And I think that if you fight these games on, I think that was one of the problems that I had in the British Championships over the years, is that I wasn't fighting every game to the death. And that was probably one of the reasons I would say why I never won the British Championship, or at least not as to date. And obviously, the older you get, the harder and harder it becomes. We're going back to 2000. 2000, I would have been 24. I was young. Didn't have as much nerves at that time. I was still quite a nervous person, but I wasn't like, you know, I didn't have the scar tissue that I have now. And you know, you need to use that. You need to use that advantage. I'm playing against Murray Chandler, who was an older player than me. I'm not sure how old Murray would have been at that time. When was Murray born? He might be slightly older than people like Mark Hebden, like, but not much older. Like maybe he was born something like 58, right? So 2000, he would have been what? Early 40s, maybe? Maybe early 40s? He'd probably be in his 40s, as a wild guess. Somewhere around about that, right? Yeah, maybe he's older than that. Maybe he's born 56. I don't know. Or maybe I'm doing him a disservice and he was born in the early 60s, like 62. But it would have probably been around about that period. But maybe he did have the scar tissue at that point. So therefore, you're younger, you need to exploit the fact that you've got that kind of nerves. And I wasn't exploiting that. But it wasn't just this game. There were many games after that in many other British Championships where I should have probably played the game out to the end. Didn't. And I paid the consequences and never won a British Championships because I never just went all in and said, look, to hell with it. You know, and this game there was loads of life left. That's all I can say. I mean, the computer does prefer black slightly. But this is deep fritz. It's not stockfish. I think stockfish does give it as equal. There's also moves like rook f1. But yeah, I think Murray had realised that the advantage had gone. He felt like a draw wasn't a terrible result. At that time, I was rated 24.99. When I look at my games from that period, they're quite bad games, some of them. And I think in some ways I'm a stronger player now. I've probably got better understanding of what my weaknesses are, at least, than I did have back then. But on the other hand, I've got less energy. I get more tired. I get tired more easily. As I said before, I've got more scar tissue than I did. Maybe my mind isn't as sharp as it was back then. My memory isn't quite as sharp or as crisp as it was back then. There's two little things. So I think it all adds up to the fact I'm probably about the same strength as I was back then. But my rating's was higher back then. So in some ways I probably was a better player back then. But anyway, so that was my British Championships candidate moves. So I think that's one thing that every chess player needs to work on, is understanding candidate moves, understanding plans, and and finding, like moves and understanding positions. If we go back to that position in the opening, there's quite a big difference in the position. So when he went here, when I went knight b3, I could have gone e5, and then after, for example, knight fd7, you take queen d6, bishop e, for example, bishop e3. There's some line like that goes like this, and then you go like h4, and then see d3 actually gives this as slightly better for black, but Stockfish already says that h4 is winning. I think it's very interesting, but yeah, you could get a line like this. So it looks actually black is absolutely fine, but it's actually quite a dangerous position for black, I think, because although very solid, you've got no weaknesses. White's doing something, whereas in the game I had no real plan. I had nothing to aim for. I went g4, and f5, and you're not really okay. You maybe have some vague ideas of going g5, but I remember thinking the game, well, g5 even goes knight h5, so what? f6 goes back to f8. But this was a very classy move as well, because the idea of g5 now can be met with bishop c3. So suddenly this bishop is it's like a good version of Benoni for black in some ways. The bishop is very good on g7. So I think that's really the weakness in my game over the years, has just been this maybe failure to understand enough middle games, play too superficially. There's something I need to address, and I think when I'm going to Hastings in a few days' time, that's something I'll look at and try and improve on, and try to think less superficially at the board, and not get too tied up about the result, and just try to play